The rain was coming down so hard it blurred the world into streaks of silver. I remember the cold wind cutting through my jacket, the metallic taste of fear on my tongue, and the voice in my head repeating over and over, "Hold on, just hold on." But it was already too late. The car swerved violently, tires screeching against the slick asphalt. The last thing I saw was Marcus's face behind the wheel, stone cold, focused, not on saving us but on making sure the crash looked real. Harper was in the passenger seat, pale and silent, eyes darting nervously between me and him. I screamed Daniel's name. He was only 6. His small hands clutched the edge of his seat as the world turned upside down. And then, darkness. I was told later that the wreck was declared a tragedy, that I had died instantly, that Marcus and Harper stood together at my funeral, comforting my little boy as the cameras flashed, the perfect picture of grief and unity. But I hadn't died. I woke up in a hospital bed days later, my body shattered and bandaged, my mind clawing through a haze of pain. No one knew I was alive, and when I finally learned the truth, that the crash had been no accident, that Marcus and Harper had been lovers behind my back and had plotted to erase me, I swore I would never forgive them. I wanted to run straight to Daniel to take my son and disappear. But my injuries kept me bedridden for months, and by the time I was strong enough to move, Marcus had buried me in the ground, at least in the eyes of the world. He'd taken my life, my family, my son. 10 years later. I stepped off the train and onto the platform of the town I once called home. The air was warmer now, the streets busier, but nothing could hide the familiar ache in my chest. I'd built a new life in another city, a new name, a new face courtesy of surgeons who had helped erase the woman I once was. Now, no one would recognize me. Not Marcus, not Harper. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I smoothed the dark green blazer that screamed money and power, adjusted the thin gold chain at my throat, and walked through the station with the kind of confidence Marcus admired in a potential business partner. Because that's who I was now, a wealthy investor ready to collaborate with Marcus Holt's growing company. He had built an empire in the decades since my death, and I planned to use every ounce of his ambition and ego against him. That night, sitting in the back of a car parked just a block from the Holt estate, I saw him for the first time in a decade. Marcus was taller, broader, his expensive suit perfectly tailored. Harper stood beside him, her hand resting on the shoulder of a small child, a girl no older than 5. My heart twisted. They'd had a child together. And then I saw Daniel. He was 16 now, his face thinner, older, but I would have known him anywhere. He didn't smile. He barely looked up as Marcus barked orders, ushering the family into their massive home. I couldn't breathe. I'd imagined this moment for so long, and yet nothing could have prepared me for the hollow look in my son's eyes. 2 days later, I found a way to get to him. It wasn't easy. Marcus kept Daniel under a watchful eye, the perfect heir to his image of success. But eventually I managed to slip into the library at his school, pretending to be a visiting donor. When Daniel walked in, his books clutched tightly to his chest, I felt my throat close. "Hi," I said softly. He blinked at me, unsure. "Do I know you?" I smiled, but it felt brittle. "Not yet." We sat down together in the corner, out of sight of the security cameras. At first he was guarded, his voice low and cautious, but the more I asked about his life, the more the walls began to crack. And then he told me everything. How Marcus treated him like a soldier, every mistake punished, every success never enough. How Harper, though kinder than Marcus, was powerless to protect him. "She tries," Daniel whispered, "but she's scared of him too. She just makes sure I have what I need. But it's not the same, you know? It's not love." My hands clenched under the table. Daniel's voice cracked when he admitted he sometimes thought about running away. "But I can't. My little sister. She needs someone to look out for her." I felt tears burn the back of my eyes. Marcus had stolen my life, my son, and yet Daniel was still the boy I'd loved, gentle, protective, carrying burdens no child should. In that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to take him back, and Marcus Holt would finally pay for everything he had done. I didn't sleep the night after meeting Daniel. His words echoed in my head, each one cutting deeper than the last. The quiet way he admitted Marcus treated him like a soldier, the way his voice cracked when he said Harper tried, but she was too afraid of Marcus to protect him. And then the part that shattered me completely. I can't leave. My little sister needs someone to look out for her. Daniel had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, just like I once did in that house. He was 16, but he spoke like a man twice his age. That was when my plan became more than revenge. I wasn't just going to destroy Marcus Holt's empire. I was going to take my son back. 2 days later, I stood in front of the Holt Corporation's glass building, sunlight reflecting off the mirrored windows like a fortress of power. I'd timed my arrival perfectly. Marcus was in the middle of a series of meetings with potential investors for his latest venture, a new subsidiary that was supposed to launch next quarter. The security guard at the front desk scanned my ID and gave me a professional smile. "Ms. Callahan, Mr. Holt will see you now." Ms. Callahan, my new name. It still felt strange on my tongue, but it had become my armor. Every document, every company record, every public trace pointed to Evelyn Callahan, a wealthy entrepreneur from Los Angeles with an impressive portfolio of investments. No one could connect me to the woman Marcus thought was buried 10 years ago. The elevator opened directly into the executive floor, and I stepped out into a sleek hallway lined with art and glass offices. At the end, Marcus's office door stood wide open, and there he was, Marcus Holt. Older now, but not softer. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. He was leaning over his desk, scrolling through documents on a tablet, his sharp jawline tight with focus. The years had been kind to him. Success suited him almost too well. I forced my heartbeat to slow and cross the threshold. "Mr. Holt," I said, my voice steady and confident. Marcus looked up, and for the briefest second, his eyes locked on mine with something almost like recognition, but it passed quickly. "Ms. Callahan," he said, offering a firm handshake. "I've heard a lot about you." I smiled faintly, slipping into the role I'd perfected. I hope it's all good things. We spent the next hour reviewing numbers, projected growth, and partnership structures. Marcus was sharp, aggressive, and every bit the businessman I remembered. But there was an edge of calculation in his questions that told me he was also testing me. I gave him nothing to doubt. By the end of the meeting, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You're very thorough," he said, almost like he was surprised. I tilted my head slightly. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all." His eyes lingered on me a beat too long. "It's refreshing." Over the following weeks, I became a fixture at the Holt Corporation headquarters. I attended board meetings, walked the halls with executives who whispered about the mysterious Ms. Callahan, and cultivated the image of a powerful ally Marcus couldn't afford to lose. And it worked. Marcus's walls began to crack. He invited me to private dinners to discuss strategy, dinners where Harper was conspicuously absent. I kept the conversation strictly professional, but I could feel his curiosity growing with each encounter. Who was I, really? Why did I seem so familiar? One night, after a board meeting that had stretched past 8, Marcus walked me to my car in the underground garage. "Callahan," he said, his voice lower than usual, "I want to thank you for what you're bringing to the company. It's been a long time since someone challenged me the way you do." I turned the key in the ignition, but didn't start the engine. "I'm glad you feel that way," I said softly. He studied me in the dim light of the garage, his brow furrowing slightly. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he admitted. but I can't quite place it. My stomach tightened, but I kept my smile in place. Maybe I just have one of those faces. Marcus's lips curved into a faint smile, but his eyes lingered too long. "I'd like you to come to dinner this weekend," he said suddenly, "at my home. My wife and I are hosting a small gathering for the board and their families. I think it would be good for you to meet everyone." There it was, the opening I'd been waiting for. "Of course," I said, as if the idea didn't send a chill down my spine. Marcus stepped back from the car, his gaze unreadable. "Good. I'll have my assistant send the details." As I drove away, the city lights blurring in my rearview mirror, I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Marcus Holt was beginning to notice me, not for who I was, but for what I appeared to be, a powerful woman who could elevate his empire. And that was exactly what I wanted, because once I was inside his world, he'd never see the knife coming. The Holt estate loomed at the end of a long, winding driveway, a fortress of glass and steel surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns. My car rolled past the iron gates as security guards in dark suits nodded us through, their earpieces glinting under the soft glow of the entry lights. I had been here before, years ago, when I was Evelyn Holt, Marcus's wife. Back then, I had chosen the pale stone for the entry columns, the warm lighting for the grand foyer. Now I was walking into the same house as a stranger. I clutched my small black clutch, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor as I stepped inside. Laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses floated from the dining room, but I kept my expression serene. "Miss Callahan!" Marcus's voice carried across the foyer, warm and charismatic. He strode toward me with a glass of whiskey in hand, his tailored navy suit fitting like a glove. "Marcus," I greeted, my voice steady even as my pulse quickened. "You look incredible," he said, his eyes sweeping over my emerald green dress. Then he leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice. "I'm glad you came." I offered a polite smile. "Wouldn't have missed it." The dining room was filled with the faces of the Holt Corporation board members and their families. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light on the polished table as waiters poured wine and laid out delicate appetizers. Harper stood near the head of the table, greeting guests with the poised charm of a perfect hostess. She wore a soft cream-colored dress, her auburn hair swept back elegantly. Our eyes met across the room. For a brief moment, her smile faltered. She didn't know me. She couldn't possibly. And yet, there was a flicker in her gaze, something wary, as if she couldn't place why I felt familiar. I crossed the room, my expression open and warm. "Mrs. Holt," I said softly, extending my hand. She blinked, recovering quickly. "Ms. Callahan, Marcus speaks highly of you." "That's very kind," I said, letting my fingers brush hers lightly before stepping back. Daniel was there too, standing off to the side with a glass of sparkling water in hand. He looked stiff in his dark blazer, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear. When his eyes met mine, something unspoken passed between us. But I couldn't approach him now. Marcus was watching, and I had to play the part. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. Marcus held court at the head of the table, charming his board members with stories of future expansion and record profits. Harper laughed at all the right moments, but I noticed the tightness around her eyes. I played my role flawlessly, engaged, intelligent, supportive. Marcus leaned toward me more than once, inviting my opinion on strategic moves. Each time I offered insight that earned approving nods from the other executives. I could feel Marcus's pride swelling with every passing minute, but I also felt Harper's eyes on me, studying me. After dessert, Marcus invited the guests to the terrace for drinks. The night air was cool, the gardens glowing under soft landscape lighting. I found a quiet spot near the balustrade, my gaze drifting to the distant tree line where I used to play with Daniel when he was small. My chest tightened at the memory. Beautiful view, isn't it? I turned to see Harper standing a few feet away, her glass of wine cradled in her hands. Yes, I said calmly. You're very lucky to live here. She studied me over the rim of her glass. You seem familiar. Have we met before? I smiled faintly. I don't think so. Harper's lips pressed together. Marcus speaks highly of you. He doesn't do that often. That's flattering, I said smoothly, though I could feel the tension building in my gut. Harper took a step closer. He's complicated. I just hope you know what you're getting into. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Should I be worried? Her eyes flicked to Marcus, who was laughing with 2 board members across the terrace. Just be careful, she said softly before walking away. The rest of the evening blurred into polite conversations and strategic smiles. By the time I slipped into my car and drove down the long driveway, I was exhausted. But I had made progress. I was in their house. Harper had noticed me, but she wasn't sure why. And Marcus had invited me deeper into his world than I had expected. The next week, Marcus called me into his office unexpectedly. Callahan, he said, leaning back in his chair. I want you to join me on a business trip next month. There's a major deal in Miami, and I think your presence would be valuable. I kept my expression neutral. I'll check my schedule. Do that, he said, his gaze lingering. I think we make a great team. That night, I met Daniel in the shadows behind the library after school. He was quieter than usual, his shoulders slumping as he sank onto the bench beside me. Are you okay? I asked softly. He hesitated, then whispered, I hate it there. My heart clenched. Marcus is worse when no one's around, Daniel admitted, his voice trembling. It's like I'm never good enough. And Harper, she tries, but she's scared of him too. She doesn't yell at me. She just keeps her distance. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You're not alone anymore, I promised. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Are you going to take me away from there? Yes, I said, my voice steady. But I need you to be patient. If we move too fast, Marcus will know, and he'll make sure we never see each other again. Daniel nodded, his jaw tight with determination. I'll do whatever you need, he whispered. 2 days later, Harper called me out of the blue. Ms. Callahan, she said, her voice clipped. I was wondering if you'd like to meet for coffee, just us. I agreed, curious. We met at a small cafe downtown, a place quiet enough that no one would overhear. I wanted to thank you, Harper said stiffly. Daniel, he seems happier lately. I don't know why, but whatever you're doing, it's helping. I smiled faintly. He's a good kid. Harper hesitated, then leaned in. Can I ask you something? Who are you, really? Because there's something about you that... I cut her off gently. I'm exactly who I say I am, Harper. But if you're worried about Marcus, you should be. He's not the man you think he is. Her face went pale. What do you mean? I didn't answer. I just gathered my bag and stood. Think about it, I said softly, and think about what he's capable of when he feels cornered. The next evening, Marcus invited me to his penthouse for a private dinner. I accepted, knowing it was a chance to get closer to the information I needed. The apartment was immaculate, every detail designed to impress. Marcus poured me a glass of wine and studied me across the table. You're different, he said finally. I can't figure you out, and that bothers me. I took a slow sip of wine. Maybe you're overthinking it. Marcus's lips curved into a faint smile. Maybe, but I like a challenge. By the time I left the penthouse, my nerves were frayed. I was walking a razor's edge and Marcus was starting to sense it. But I couldn't back down, because I had something now I hadn't had before. Harper's doubt, Daniel's trust, and Marcus's growing obsession. If I played this right, it would all collapse around him. As I drove away from the glittering skyline, my phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. We need to talk. It's about Marcus, and it's about the accident. My breath caught. Who was this? And what did they know? The message burned in my mind the entire night. Unknown number. We need to talk. It's about Marcus, and it's about the accident. I stared at the screen in the darkened bedroom of my rented apartment, my heart pounding. Who could it be? A former employee? A witness? Or was it a trap Marcus had set, suspecting something? I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I waited until morning, when the first light crept through the blinds, and typed a single word. Me. Where? The reply came instantly. Unknown number, Pier 17. 10 p.m. Come alone. The day passed in a haze. I attended meetings at Holt Corporation, smiled at Marcus's charming remarks, even endured a lunch with several board members while my mind churned. Marcus was becoming more attentive, more interested. He hovered during the meetings, often leaning close as if he couldn't help himself. I feel like we work so well together, he said at one point, his hand brushing mine. I forced a polite laugh. We do, but every touch, every look felt like a trap waiting to snap shut. At 10 p.m., I stood at Pier 17, the night air sharp with the scent of salt water and diesel. The docks were deserted except for a lone figure standing near the edge. He turned as I approached. "Who are you?" I demanded softly. The man's face was gaunt, weathered by years of hard living. "Name's Calder," he said, his voice hoarse. "I worked for Marcus 10 years ago." My chest tightened. "You know about the accident." Calder nodded. "I was the one who planted the charge on your car. I didn't know you were in it until it was too late. Marcus paid me to make it look like a brake failure." Rage flashed white-hot in my veins. "And now you want to confess?" "I thought you were dead," Calder said, looking down. "But I saw you with Daniel the other day. I figured you'd want to know the rest." "The rest?" Calder glanced around nervously. "Marcus had me kill someone, a guy named Roy Jennings. He was an accountant for the company. Roy found out about Marcus's offshore accounts, the bribes. He was going to the police. Marcus couldn't risk it, so I did what I was told." I felt my blood run cold. "And now?" I asked. Calder shifted uneasily. "Marcus found out I was still in town. He wants me gone. I need protection, and I figured you'd want proof." He held up a small USB drive. "Everything's on here. Emails, transfers, Marcus's orders. Enough to bury him." I reached for it slowly. "Why should I trust you?" "Because Marcus is coming for me," Calder said simply. "And he'll come for you too, if he figures out who you really are." I didn't tell Marcus or Harper about the meeting. But the next morning, as I stood in the glass-walled conference room, I saw Marcus watching me with that calculating gaze. He didn't say a word, just smiled faintly, as if he could sense I was holding a secret. That afternoon, Harper called again. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice tight. "Please, I need to talk to you." We met at the same cafe downtown, the quiet one where no one ever paid attention to who came and went. Harper looked exhausted, her auburn hair pulled into a loose knot, dark circles under her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. She hesitated, then blurted, "Do you ever feel like Marcus is dangerous?" I studied her carefully. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because lately he's been different," Harper whispered. "Secretive, angry. I'm scared of him." I leaned in slightly. "Harper, if you know something, you need to tell me, for Daniel's sake, for your own." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know anything concrete. I can't shake the feeling he's hiding something. And Daniel, he's so withdrawn. I'd try, but Marcus controls everything." I reached across the table, letting my fingers brush hers. You're stronger than you think. You just have to decide whose side you're on." Harper looked away. "I can't betray my husband." I didn't push. Instead, I let silence stretch between us, knowing the seed had been planted. The next week was a blur of careful moves. I spent hours with Daniel whenever I could, giving him glimpses of hope without making Marcus suspicious. "You'll be out of there soon," I promised one night as we met behind the library, "but I need you to stay strong a little longer." "I will," Daniel whispered, his eyes bright. "Just don't leave me again." I swallowed hard, hugging him tightly. Never. One evening, Harper showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in the hallway clutching a manila envelope. "I shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling. "What is it?" I asked. "Marcus has offshore accounts," Harper whispered. "I found these in his office. If he knew I took them—" I opened the envelope. Bank statements, wire transfers, documents tying Marcus to money laundering and shell companies. "This is enough to put him away," I said softly. Harper shook her head. "No, it's not. He'll find a way to explain it. He always does. But maybe it's a start." "Why are you giving me this?" She hesitated. "Because I'm tired of being afraid, and because Daniel deserves better. He's a good boy. He doesn't deserve Marcus's anger." I felt a surge of gratitude and guilt. Harper had helped Marcus destroy me, but she had also been trapped in his web for years. "Thank you," I said quietly. A few days later, Marcus invited me to a private dinner at a secluded estate he used for business retreats. "I want to talk about the future," he said, pouring wine into my glass. I smiled, though my instincts screamed that this was dangerous. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You're not like the others, Callahan. You don't need me, and that makes you fascinating." "Is that a compliment?" I asked lightly. "Maybe." He set his glass down, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But it also makes me wonder what you really want." I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Isn't it obvious? I want to see Holt Corporation succeed." Marcus's lips curved into a thin smile. "Good, because people who get in my way don't last long." The air grew thick with unspoken threat. When I returned home that night, I found another message waiting. Unknown number. "Marcus is planning something. Be careful." I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. Was Calder still alive? Or was someone else watching me? The next morning, Harper called in a panic. "Evelyn, Callahan," she corrected herself hastily. "Marcus knows I took the documents. He's furious. He hasn't said anything yet, but I can feel it. Please, you have to help me." I grabbed my keys. "Where are you?" "At home," Harper whispered. "He's out right now, but I don't know for how long." I arrived at the Holt estate within 20 minutes. Harper met me at the door, her hands shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Marcus, he's going to kill me. I know it." I guided her into the study and closed the door. "Listen to me. We have enough to bring him down, but I need you to trust me completely." Harper nodded, sobbing softly. "Good," I said, "because the next step is going to be dangerous." That night, I called Calder. "It's time," I told him. "We're going to end this." The storm outside matched the chaos brewing inside me. Harper sat in my apartment, clutching a mug of untouched tea, her eyes wide and rimmed red. "He knows," she whispered. "Marcus knows I took the documents. He's been watching me like a hawk. I'm afraid he's going to do something final." I crouched down in front of her, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through my veins. "Listen to me, Harper. We're too close to stop now. We have Calder's testimony, your documents, and Daniel's word. We just need to force Marcus into the open." Harper nodded shakily. "But how?" I glanced at my phone, scrolling through messages from Calder. He was nervous, desperate to finish this before Marcus silenced him for good. "We'll bait him," I said finally, "but we have to be smarter than he is." That evening, I received a message from Marcus himself. Marcus, dinner at my penthouse tomorrow. Just us. I have something important to discuss. I stared at the screen, my gut tightening. Marcus never used words like important without meaning something sinister. Harper read the message over my shoulder. "He's planning something," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," I said quietly, "which is why I'm going." The next day was a blur of preparation. I met Calder in a dingy motel room near the outskirts of town. He looked worse than ever, his hands shaking as he handed me another USB drive. "This is everything," he said. "Every email, every offshore transfer, the recording of Marcus ordering me to take out Roy Jennings. If you leak this to the police and the press, he's done." I gripped the drive tightly. "Thank you." Calder's gaze darted toward the window. "Be careful, Marcus. He doesn't just eliminate threats. He makes examples out of them." That night, I arrived at Marcus's penthouse dressed in black, my expression carefully neutral. Marcus greeted me at the door with a glass of wine and that same charming smile that had once made me believe I could trust him. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "I've been looking forward to this all day." I forced a smile. "So have I." Dinner was a minefield. Marcus poured the wine himself, his eyes lingering on me with something darker than curiosity. "You've been busy lately," he said casually, slicing into his steak. "Meetings, private calls. I hope you're not neglecting our partnership." "I'd never do that," I said evenly. Marcus leaned back, his gaze sharp. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said softly, "someone who betrayed me once." I met his stare without flinching. "And what happened to her?" His smile was slow, predatory. "She's not around anymore." I barely touched my food. Every instinct screamed that Marcus was building up to something. And then he said it. "Callahan. Or should I say Evelyn?" My blood ran cold. Marcus's lips curved into a cruel smile. "You think I wouldn't recognize you? A new name, a few changes to your face. But I'd know those eyes anywhere. My wife, back from the dead." I stood slowly, my heart pounding. "You killed me once, Marcus. You won't get another chance." Marcus moved faster than I expected, pulling a gun from the sideboard and pointing it at my chest. "Oh, I think I will," he said softly, "because you've been meddling in my life long enough. Harper, Calder, you think I don't know they're helping you? They're as disposable as you." At that moment, the door burst open. "Marcus!" Harper's voice was sharp with fear. She stood in the doorway clutching her phone. "Don't do this. The police are on their way. If you hurt her—" Marcus turned the gun toward Harper. "You little traitor," he snarled. "I should have known you'd fold the moment things got hard." I took a step forward, forcing his attention back to me. "Marcus, think about Daniel. He's upstairs right now, isn't he? What happens when he sees you kill his mother?" For the first time, Marcus hesitated. Daniel's voice cut through the tension. "Dad?" He stood at the top of the stairs, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Go back to your room," Marcus barked, his voice cracking. But Daniel didn't move. "What's going on? Why do you have a gun?" "Because she's a liar," Marcus shouted, gesturing wildly at me. "She's trying to destroy us, Daniel. Everything we've built." I stepped forward slowly, my hands raised. "Daniel, listen to me. I'm your mother. They lied to you about me, but I never stopped loving you." Daniel's face crumpled as memories seemed to flood back. Memories of the woman who had kissed his forehead goodnight, who had held him close after nightmares. "Mom?" he whispered. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my cheeks. "It's me, sweetheart. And I'm here to take you home." Marcus roared in frustration and lunged toward me, the gun swinging wildly. I ducked as the shot went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Harper screamed, shielding Daniel with her body as Marcus fired again, the bullet shattering a vase behind us. I scrambled for cover behind the dining table, my hands searching desperately for something, anything to use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a heavy candlestick. "Marcus, stop!" Harper cried. "The police are coming. You can't get out of this." Marcus laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "I've gotten out of worse." The sirens grew louder outside. Marcus's eyes darted to the window, then back to me. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me," he hissed. He charged. I swung the candlestick with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with his wrist, sending the gun skittering across the floor. Marcus howled in pain and grabbed my throat, slamming me against the wall. I clawed at his hands, gasping for air as spots danced in my vision. And then Daniel was there, slamming into Marcus's side with all the force of a terrified 16-year-old. "Get off her!" Daniel shouted. Marcus staggered back, releasing me. The gun lay only a few feet away. I dove for it. The front door burst open. "Police! Drop your weapon!" Marcus froze as officers flooded the penthouse, guns drawn. "Don't shoot!" Harper cried, pulling Daniel behind her. I rose slowly, the gun trembling in my hands. For a brief, agonizing moment, I considered pulling the trigger. Marcus had taken everything from me. He deserved to pay. But Daniel's eyes stopped me. He had already seen enough violence for one lifetime. I set the gun on the table and stepped back. Marcus didn't fight as the officers swarmed him, forcing him to the ground and snapping cuffs around his wrists. His eyes burned into mine, filled with hatred and disbelief. "You think you've won?" he spat. I met his gaze evenly. "No, Marcus, I know I have." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Calder's testimony, Harper's documents, and the mountain of evidence from the USB drive painted a damning picture. Marcus was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, money laundering, and the decade-old murder of Roy Jennings. The empire he had built crumbled overnight. I stood outside the courthouse a week later, the sun warm on my face as Daniel gripped my hand. He hadn't let go since the night of the arrest. Harper approached us slowly, her young daughter clinging to her leg. Her face was pale, drawn, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said softly, "but thank you for saving Daniel and for not letting Marcus hurt anyone else." I looked down at the little girl holding Harper's hand. She couldn't have been more than 5. "You're a mother," I said quietly. "I know what it's like to do whatever it takes to protect your child. Start over, Harper. She deserves better." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "So does Daniel. Please, tell him I'm sorry." I nodded once. As Harper walked away, Daniel squeezed my hand. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. Are we going home now?" I looked at him, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. "Yes," I said softly, "we're going home." And this time, no one would ever take him from me again. The courtroom was silent as the judge pounded the gavel. "All rise." Marcus Holt shuffled in, flanked by 2 guards. His once perfect suit now hung loose, the expensive fabric rumpled and stained. The smug arrogance I had come to know so well was gone, replaced by a hard edge of desperation. He caught my gaze as he passed, his eyes burning with hatred. I didn't look away. The trial moved quickly. The mountain of evidence was overwhelming. Calder's testimony, Harper's documents, the recordings of Marcus's orders to eliminate Roy Jennings. Every sordid detail was laid bare. The offshore accounts, the staged accident, the manipulation, the violence. Daniel sat beside me every day, his hand gripping mine under the table. I could feel the tremors in his fingers each time Marcus's crimes were recounted. Harper testified too. She stood at the witness stand, her voice shaking as she described the years of fear, the subtle threats, the moments she'd looked away because she was too terrified to act. "I let Marcus control me," she admitted, tears streaking her cheeks. "But I'm here now because Daniel deserves the truth. Evelyn deserves the truth." When she stepped down, I saw a glimmer of release in her expression, as if speaking the words had freed her from a decade of chains. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. Marcus's head snapped up, his face a mask of fury. "This isn't over," he roared as the guards restrained him. "You think you've won? Evelyn, you're nothing without me, nothing." I stood calmly, Daniel's hand still in mine. "No, Marcus," I said softly, my voice steady and clear. "I'm finally free." The judge's gavel slammed down one last time. Marcus Holt was led away in chains. Weeks passed, but the wounds of the last decade were still fresh. I stood in the kitchen of the small house Daniel and I had moved into, watching him set the table with the awkwardness of a boy who'd never been allowed to do something so simple. "You don't have to help, sweetheart," I said. "I want to," he said quickly, glancing at me with a tentative smile. "It feels normal. I like normal." I swallowed the lump in my throat and hugged him tightly. "Me too." Harper visited once, a few days after the trial ended. She stood at the doorway, her daughter clinging shyly to her leg. "I came to say thank you," Harper said softly. "And goodbye. We're leaving town. I think we both need a fresh start." I looked at the little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5, her wide eyes filled with uncertainty. "You're doing the right thing," I said quietly. "She deserves a better life than the one Marcus gave you." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "So does Daniel. Please, tell him I'm sorry." "I will," I said. When she turned to leave, I felt no anger, just a quiet acceptance. Harper had made mistakes, unforgivable ones, and she had also helped me in the end. And she was a mother, too. I couldn't take that away from her. Daniel came into the room as Harper's car pulled out of the driveway. "Who was that?" he asked. "Someone who needed to start over," I said. He nodded slowly, then slipped his hand into mine. "Can we start over too?" I looked down at him, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. "Yes," I said softly. "We already have." It wasn't easy. Daniel still woke from nightmares some nights, drenched in sweat, his voice hoarse from screaming. I sat on the edge of his bed and held him until the tremors stopped, whispering that he was safe, that no one would hurt him again. I still flinched at sudden noises, still caught myself glancing over my shoulder when I walked alone at night. But we were healing. Together. One evening, Daniel found me sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Mom?" he said hesitantly. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Do you ever wish things had been different? That Dad hadn't—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I reached for his hand, squeezing gently. "I wish you'd never had to go through what you did," I said honestly. "But we can't change the past. All we can do is move forward." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. I want to be better than him. I don't ever want to hurt people like he did." I pulled him into a hug, my voice thick with emotion. "You won't, Daniel. You already are better. You're kind and strong and you care about others. That's what makes you different." He buried his face in my shoulder. "I'm glad you came back for me, Mom." I held him close, the weight of a decade of loss and pain lifting from my chest. "I'll always come back for you," I whispered. "Always." The night was quiet, the stars glittering faintly above us. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Marcus Holt was gone. His empire was gone. The fear was gone. And in its place was something fragile and precious. Hope. That is my journey. A journey full of loss and betrayal, but also a testament to the power of faith and motherly love. If you've ever felt broken, betrayed, or powerless, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. I was left for dead, robbed of my child, my life, my future. But I fought my way back, not just for justice, but for the people I loved, for Daniel, who needed his mother, and for the woman I used to be, who deserved better. We all deserve better. If you're carrying your own scars, don't give up. Don't let the people who hurt you define you. There is life after betrayal. There is strength in survival. And when the time is right, you can take back everything they tried to steal from you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can find the strength to rise above their pain. Because we are not our past. We are what we choose to become.